Committee of the Whole is now called to order. Mr. Speaker, you're recognized for a second round.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel for being back here today. Let's recap why we're here and how we got here. There is a request for $17,654,625, of which $8,400,000 it's to meet its operational safety needs given the shortfall in fiscal 2026 revenues, and $9,254,625 to pay prior year obligations for aviation fuel tax arrearages in compliance with FAA requirements. And before us, you provided the airport, you provided us with a draft, not completed yet, I fully understand that, of what your draft budget proposal for FY 2027. And in your draft, while you initially, after the result of discussions, while your initial budget projection was at $60,285,884, you feel confident that you can reduce it by $3 million. Let me start with that first. And since the last time we met, is there an opportunity for further reduction?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Speaker. That is what we're working on now, is to look at how we can further reduce to below 57. Our division heads have been given a directive to look at. We're trying to reduce it by at least another $1 million. That's our target that we have right now. And we're waiting for, well, we're going to be meeting with our division heads, when we're done with session, I guess, so that we can make sure that they have been able to reduce their specific budgets to that level. But we're looking at least another $1 million. That's what we're trying or targeting. But again, that's something that we're still reviewing.
Okay. Let's just go with what you can do right now, and you can do right now $3 million, okay?
Yes.
Hopefully we can get it down another $1 million, that'll be good. Okay? So let's just use that figure, 57 billion. Now, if I go to page 2 of 3 of Exhibit E, no, actually no, page 1 of 3 of Exhibit E, your budget first off, there's a discrepancy here. Can you explain the difference between what you present in page 1 of $60,285,000 and then what you present here on page 2, page 1 of 3, under total signatory airline rents and fees of $61,194,806. Why the difference?
Would you please let me know what the, I see the 61.194, but I missed the first number, Mr. Speaker. Would you please?
The number that you gave on the first page, $60,285,884.
Oh, okay. Hold on just a second. Let me just go ahead and get to that page. So the number on page 1 of 1 on Exhibit D, the $60,285,884, represents our operational and maintenance expenses only, but it does not, with regards to how we can bridge the gap between what our expenses are going to be and what we are going to be trying to recover through the cost recovery rate and methodology that we utilize as we work on our rates. The difference between that and really what our total that we're trying to recover is going to be, excuse me. So the 61.1, and maybe I need to kind of go back to how we come up with the amounts that's going to be charged to the airlines first, so that will help this whole process. So when we look at what we're going to be charging the airlines, right, and really what we need to do is we need to take into consideration what are called the non-aeronautical revenues. For example, we do have some rentals in Teason area, right? We have also our concession revenues. So those things are, some things may be related to the passenger traffic we have, but not directly and not called signatory or aeronautical because they're not directly generated from the actual airlines. So when we talk about how we come up with our budget, we look at how much our operation and maintenance expenses are going to be, how much our debt service is going to be, and also how much our other cash outlays are going to be, for example, for our cash-funded projects. And for this year also, what we've been trying to do actually for the last couple of years is try to also fill our operation and maintenance, our O&M trust fund or O&M reserve. And so when we talk about what we're trying to earn or what we're trying to have as revenues, we look at, again, our total O&M, our total of all of these other items that we mentioned, and really where you look to is to page 3 of 3, which is the total of which we talked about the other day, the difference between the total revenues, the 92 minus the 78. So when we think about what we need to cover everything, to include not just our O&M, our debt service, right, our share of FAA funded projects, then we reduce the amount. We reduce or we take out, when we're thinking about what we're going to charge the airlines, all those non-aeronautical. So the concession revenues, we have also some miscellaneous revenues, for example, for badges and IDs. We get interest income from some of our investments and some of our accounts. So we take those all out before we try to calculate what we're going to charge to the airlines. And so that, although you see our O&M is in the $60 million range on that page 1 of Exhibit D, that O&M is not all we need to try to cover, because there are things that are off of the income statement that we're trying to cover. There are, again, the things that you don't see is our payments for our bonds, and then our share of the cash-funded projects, which get capitalized because they're assets. They could be improvements to our building and our facility, right, that you don't see in our expenses directly. So that's why, although you see $60 million here, what we're trying to recover from the airlines is a little bit more there, because it's not, although it's related, again, we have to take the $60 million on the first page of Exhibit D, and we have to add all of the additional cash outlays. And then from there, we subtract out what we think we can earn from all of our other non-aeronautical revenues to come up with an amount then that we're going to charge to the airlines. And that's how we come up with the $61 million on page 1 of 3 of Exhibit E.
Okay, but when I look at what you say here in page 1, and I look at page 2, it's still, thank you for trying to explain it, because then you look at page 1, you have a category down here that says other expenses.
Oh, yes, and so if you're looking at Exhibit D for actuals for 2025 and 2026, is that what you're referring to, Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So those other expenses are actually directly related to, I believe, we had some typhoon expenses that we were still working to pay for when we got into FY25. And those things are generally not budgeted, but that's what I believe that those are is and although we did have Typhoon Mawar in 2023, it took some time for us to do, design and other things before we began to be able to make payment or move forward with some projects. So the other expenses actually represents the payments that we had made so that way, we could do repairs and other things for in the aftermath of Typhoon Mawar.
So if you receive the appropriation, the full amount of the appropriation of $17,654,625, how would that affect page 1 of Exhibit E? Okay?
Page 1 of Exhibit E?
Yeah. How would it affect the budget?
Okay, so basically what happens is, and again, we have what's called a cost recovery method. So we are trying to recover, whether in terms of our budget, right? We estimate to try to recover our costs. And that $17.65 million, what that would mean for us for 2027, for FY 2026, because if you look at the actual estimate that we have for our what we're expected to generate in FY 2026 versus the budget, we're actually, as I mentioned before, we're projecting to have about a $10 million to $12.5 million shortfall in revenues. And so for FY 2026, the $17.65 million would help us to reduce a portion of that, which we're going to use for our defeasance, is going to help us to offset the impact of the shortage. And that approximately $9 million, because it's about $8.8 million defeasance, is going to help us so that we don't have to pass on any increases to the airlines. So for FY26, $9 million will help so that way it'll bridge the gap between what we had projected in terms of our revenues to where we actually expect to be. That's the first portion of that. That's in the budget 2026 column, the budget versus actual, the middle two columns. For budget 2027, what the remaining portion of the 17.65 will do, which is going to be $8.65 or 8.65 million, but it's the equivalent of a reduction in CPE of 8.65, right? So if we started out with a CPE of 55, and as we talked about earlier, we were able to make a reduction of $3 million to the initial $60 million. So that is a $3 reduction of the $55 CPE. So we take 55 minus 3, we come up with 52 CPE to start with. And as we talked about, the 17.65 minus 9 yields 865. So if we take the $52 CPE that's left over, and the difference left over in the 17.65, which is going to be helping us with FY27, 52 minus 8.65 gives us about 43. And if we want to be very exact, 52.06 minus 8.65 is 43.41. But then that means that's a CPE of 43.41. Where we are in FY 2026 is 34.99. If we were to try to maintain that same rate coming into FY 27, meaning that we would want to go from the 43.41 to 34.99, then the difference is $8.42 million that we would need. So the 17.65 basically would help us to stave off any additional increase in or rate adjustment in the current fiscal year to the tune that $9 million is going to help with that. And the remaining 865 is going to help us to get to about 43.41 in terms of a CPE for FY 2027.
And that's with the assumption that your CPE actually, the total number of enplaned passengers is at 1.1 million passengers?
Yes.
That's the assumption.
That is the projection provided directly from the airlines, yes,
Projection,
sir.
assumption, semantics.
Yes,
right?
yes, sir.
So if they don't reach 1.1 million passengers, let's say we only get 1 million, where does that put us in now?
So
Let's even worst case scenario. Say when you get 950,000 passengers.
Well, it would depend on where we end up with regards to our CPE, right? The impact. And so, you know, of course, if we're going to leave it at 4341, and then we have 1,111,000, just 1,000,000, and we only generate like 900,000 passengers, then of course you take the difference and you will multiply it by the 4341, and that should generally give us the difference. And of course there's concession revenues and other revenues we have to consider, but primarily the difference is going to be in that. So you would just take the difference and multiply it by the CPE that we are going to be charging, and that would be the difference in revenues for the signatory airlines.
So the key here is that other than receiving the funding that you're asking for, is to keep airlines flying, continually flying in so that we can meet our employment, our passenger quota, right? For lack of a better term, right?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker, yes.
And right now, even at $34.99 per passenger, we got airlines that are basically saying, I can't sustain this any longer.
Our discussions really have been regarding FY27. So with regards to FY27, the concern is that we're going to have an increase. With regards to FY26, I know we only have a couple more months left over, but really the concern is coming into FY27. Yes, but yes, there's always concern, especially with rising costs, and that was all in the objection letters. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, I think in the objection letters, what we have to see is other than losing the asset, losing the aircraft, we're going to lose the seats, and if we don't lose the seats, there's no way we're going to get to this.
Right, it's difficult,
right?
Yes.
And because right now, even at $34.99, it's hard for them to sustain it. Right?
I mean, I believe that even with $34.99, again, they're calling out the different challenges that are occurring because of the geopolitical situation, and of course, the concern about.
And so this is where I need to get the mindset. Guys, we can't live in a bubble. Things are happening externally that is affecting us internally, and for us to be able to think that we can continue with at least the status quo can't exist. Okay? The airport, the air terminal relies on that. Okay? We're not a restaurant out in the middle, on the community that is, once the tourism goes down, all we have to do is just try to bring in more local customers to be able to offset it. We can't do that with us. And while the businesses, while the community tries to regain itself, the problem, and it's not just with the airport, okay? But the problem that I'm seeing here in almost every place is we want to continue to continue with the status quo or to increase what we're going to need or what we want. It's not a matter of what we need. So the exercise I'd like to be able for you guys to exercise is not what you want, but what you need. And in trying to get to that process, let's look at some of the things that we had put into place that we want to be able to fulfill. We want to be able to build here. We want to be able to do this here. But we just don't have the funding. You know, and then when I go back to, you know, your budget request detail, while I see some decreases in certain areas, I also see significant increases far and above organic. And I'm looking at this as, this is again an exercise of what we want. This is not an exercise of what we need to do to survive. My fear here is that even if we provide you this 17.6 and we continue down this path, you're going to be in front of this body in due time. I think that there are, you know, I'll say it. Let's take a look at our salaries. Let's take a look at what we're paying people. We're in a crisis. Can you agree with me on that?
Yes, we're in a difficult situation, yes.
Okay. And crisis basically demands looking at every facet of an operation to include what we pay. Okay. And I think that some of the things that we paid for, you know, Mr. Obama, I got to say, okay, it's the authority of the board to be able to look at it and demand for reducing it, or to look into it to see how there could be cost-cutting measures there. Reduction temporarily. Okay. Because, guys, outside of what you want, what you need, there are other demands that within the government. Okay? So please understand where we're at. Okay. We could have prepared a little bit better. That's water under the bridge. Now how do we move forward? And I think part of that is we got to go back and look at some of the things that we implemented, we put in place, okay, that we may have to scale back on. That's my time, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Gumikato, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. GIA commented during the June 30, 2026 joint oversight hearing that the authority anticipated a $10.5 million shortfall for operations then. I was going to ask you all today if you could provide a breakdown of the FY 2026 obligations that are tied to this anticipated shortfall, including information on when the authority recognized that revenue collections were tracking below adopted projections, but you just testified that your team is working on this right now to include cost containment measures. Why not make the ask of your division heads sooner, like right after the joint oversight hearing? Did I miss something between the comments then and this morning, some 38 days later?
With regards to the budget process, again, our budget process involves consultation with the airlines, and the usual process is that we provide the airlines with a version of the budget in July, sometime between the early to mid part of July. And our team had been working with the airlines on their projections, working on our expenses. And the budget process actually usually involves going back and forth on expenses and other items with the airlines. And we also present to them even our various projects, capital projects that we have. And so, I mean, I believe we had already begun to, even after the first version of the budget was provided to the airlines, we'd already begun to look at areas we can cut. And, you know, of course, there are things within the projection, the original version of the budget that we had provided that were reflective of things that we had not been able to do. As an example, we have some challenges with our radios. And then also, I believe GPD, with regards to their radios, they're working on some kind of an upgrade to their system so that we can tie into their system and so that our team is safe, our firefighters, our APD is safe when they're in the terminals. We actually had allowed for or put some money into the budget for that, for FY27. What's also part of the increase in the budget is We have some of the ARF truck parts that we need because we are having to work on making sure that our ARF trucks are in good shape. Otherwise, that impacts our index. And what that means if we have our index reduced is that we cannot have wide bodies flying into Guam, right? If we have a challenge with our ARF trucks. So to not have wide bodies flying into Guam is going to be a bad thing as well. So looking at in terms of the actual working on the budget, it's been something that we have been working on. It wasn't something that we hadn't worked on. It was something that was ongoing as of the June 30 oversight hearing. But of course, again, this is their budget process involves going back and forth. And sometimes we're even going back and forth with the airlines, coming into August, which is like now. So again, it's been an ongoing process. This is a dynamic document. The numbers, change, of course, as we move through the process. But no, we've been going through it. It's just not perhaps something that is evident to the body.
Now, I didn't want to go on the ARF trucks, but if you can't fix an ARF door, that ARF certification is already compromised because we've already been talking about this for a bit, but I'm not going to kind of go down that road at this point. Regarding the OPA's report that GIA's federal capital grants increased in FY 2025 from $9.1 million to $14.8 million, what is the combined value of the authority's federal program inventory and the corresponding local match requirement?
Thank you for the question, Senator. For the past, the period of performance for the grants is normally 4 years. So going back to 2022, we have about approximately $31.3 million in IAP funds outstanding. And you just take 10% of that to get close to the sponsor share. Now you add the grants that are going to be issued for FY26, that's another $21 million. And again, it's still a 90-10 sponsor share, 10%. We don't have that figured out on this sheet, but we do have what the federal grants total are.
So has the airport determined how much more in local matching funds it will need in order to secure any additional federal grants for the next 2 to 3 years? You went back 2, so going the other way.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea how much local matching funds you're going to need?
Presently in consultations with the FAA for our, what we call the ACIP, which is the Airport Capital Improvement Plan, going out to 2030. So what we're doing is just prioritizing projects that fit within this different AIP schemes, which one is entitlements, the other one's discretionary, the other one is other programs like military airport program. So we are working on that, but with respect to what we needed, and I think Daphne had indicated that we need in the neighborhood of $9 million. And we were able to work with the FAA on pushing the sponsor share to the end of the project. So if you have 10 million and say the first 9 million is paid for 100% by the federal government, then the remaining 10% would be paid at the end. So what's coming up is the last payments of some major projects, including the apron project is 41 million. Then we have a roof project coming up, which right now is at 30 million.
Okay. Well, thank you for your answers. And I was just looking at the budget, Mr. Chair, and those are some big numbers. I just don't know how $400,000 annually each year for the last 2 fiscal years is going to be able to make the federal grant match. That's a lot of money, and I appreciate the insight that you will be waiting to the end of the program period to be able to get those matching. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time.
Senator, if I could just also add, that's
Please,
actually an effort that we undertook when we saw this on the horizon, so that working with FAA to going to delay our portions towards the end of everything, and that's actually coming up. We would have hoped that things would have turned around within these last couple of years, but now it's time for us to, to bone up on our portion of it.
Right,
and that's going to happen in 27.
And Mr. Chair, does that happen at other airports across the country where they defer it like that? From your experience?
I have to say that it's
unique.
It's developed. Obviously, a situation here has caused us to have those kind of discussions, and I think with the relationship that we have with the FAA, I think that was only possible because of that.
Got it.
Yeah, we're just saying that FAA, because of our what we've been doing in the region and helping other regions and stuff, we developed a good relationship. And also they've been tracking our slow recovery. Us and CNMI are the two most affected airports in the region.
No, and I appreciate that. And considering two natural disasters in less than a year, that I'm sure that all their attention is on how air transportation is affected throughout the region by just, again, those two natural disaster events. Mr. Chair, that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Sidus Masia, Mr. Chair, and Manana Sidus, then Biba Betness to the people of Guam watching on our YouTube channel, and thank you again for the panel for being here. Well, there's just so many numbers being thrown around. I just wanted to go back to what the bill says. And so the day before yesterday, we had talked about the actual number that's needed, and you had said it was 26 million, correct?
If you round it, it's really 27 million. 27.
So is that still the number that's holding steady that's needed?
If we were to target our CPE to go down to 34.99 status quo, 27 million is what our target would be.
I wanted to ask about the CPE. So this is the rate for the passengers on the planes. How often is this rate adjusted?
So our CPE is, it's annually reviewed and adjusted it's basically reviewed and adjusted on an annual basis.
By the board?
How it gets approved, ultimately, so the CPE is not really the rate. The CPE is the sum of all of the rates, right? All of the revenue generated from the airlines divided by the airline and plane passengers to get to the CPE. So it's an indicator of what the rate is, right? So the higher it goes, the higher the rates are. The lower it goes, the lower the rates are. But the rates themselves and the actual budget gets approved by the board, but that is subsequent to consultation with the airlines because the airlines also have to agree to the rates as well.
Okay. So with the 27 million, we're going to be able to hold the rates status quo for how long, do you think?
Well, the 27 really is what we're projecting or predicting we'll need for FY26, so we don't have to increase rates in this next month, and then also for FY27. That's what, we're just really looking at FY26 and 27.
You know, I was going through the letters and thinking about what you had said about if we don't get this money that, you're going to have to raise the rates and it's going to lead to impacts to the cost of air travel, right? Do you have any numbers on that? What that increase would be anticipated?
That's something that, of course, the airlines are the ones that will dictate the rates, so we can't say, but we could just say that what our cost is going to be to them. And
this wouldn't be just for the rates for, Korean airlines?
This is the rates for all our signatory airlines and actually primarily for our signatory airlines, but it also impacts everyone else, if you'll see on the proposed rates and fees change.
Are these all the letters that you got from the airlines?
We received 5.
5. Did you get one from United?
We did not get a written letter from United.
Have any communication with them regarding the issue?
Yes, they're very concerned that that rate increase is something that perhaps is not going to allow for it to be sustainable.
Thank you, because I just wanted to have that explained as, this is to me it seems like a complicated issue, but I wanted to ask, I know that you guys were anticipating how much of an increase in the rates again?
For FY20,
trying to generate the 27 million.
So for FY26, if we're able to bill over the next 2 months, we would have to increase the rates from $34.99 to $68, but that's to bill over 2 months because we're trying to recover a full year's worth of shortage. For FY27, for FY26. For FY27, we're going from $34.99 to, we're projecting to 55, which is about 157% of where we are. So 55 divided by 34.99 is so it's 157% of where we are today.
But again, if you get the 27 million, then all that's just
Yes.
killed, right? So are they opposed to any increase or just a crazy 100% increase?
As we've discussed with them, are they opposed to any increase? They're opposed to the moving up to 157%.
I'm sure. I mean,
for
who wouldn't
sure.
be, right?
Right. I mean, in terms of what their thresholds are, that's something that, again, is really dependent upon the airline. But, you know, and we can't speak for them. But, you know, of course, any type of increase may be challenging. But really, I think primarily the discussion has been they're opposed to this in 157%.
What are they doing in other jurisdictions relative to, you know, accommodating the airlines or increasing fees to recoup costs? Because I know that everyone's kind of facing the same challenges, right, with the aviation fuel and.
Senator, I could probably just give some color on that. The competition we face, most of these destinations are thriving. So there's actually a lot of demand for seats in many markets. We're in a unique spot, right? Having dollar-based economy and what's going on with our tourism. But I think if you compare like nationally, we're way up there when it comes to CPE in comparison, even to an airport that would be like of similar size.
So I got to ask, right, we're going through all of this effort to keep the rates the same, but it kind of sounds like, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, you think that in order to compete with a lot of these other destinations that are seeing, you know, more visitors, do you believe we need to look at ways to lower the rates?
I'm just speaking as you know, like straight economics. I think there's a lot more to this equation than just the airport fees, right? Because it's all a function of scale. But I think that airlines probably make a decision on how much it costs to fly to a destination or to an airport, and if it makes more sense to them to relocate an aircraft, which is what we don't want, then they probably have that decision to make. I can't speak for the airlines, but I'd just say purely that's the economies of transportation.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I mean, we want to get the passengers in the seats and get them to come to Guam to visit our island. But as you know, we're kind of struggling on the GVB side. And I'm sure it's all relative. And so, again, just going back to what I said in the beginning, I'm not sure we have a choice in giving this $27 million to the airport. And I'm curious to see how the body's going to move in this direction. But, you know, it kind of sounds like you guys knew about the shortfall. It was disclosed in the hearing. You know, since you kind of had that idea about it, what efforts did you institute, if any, to bring costs down or contain costs or, you know, implement any type of austerity measures?
Well, so, you know, of course, the recovery of tourism is something that we've been, you know, struggling with, not just recently, right, but in the last few years. How we've been able to stave off having to pass on some additional rate or increase the rates for the airlines in the last few years. We actually have, we mentioned yesterday or the other day that we did some bond transactions. One which came at the end of FY24, but which impacted FY25. So we've done so far, we've done a defeasance, we've done a standalone tender, and those have all been for the purpose of trying to make sure that we can meet what's required for our bonds without having to pass on additional increases, right? So we have been, you know, working to find or utilize tools to help. Again, with this idea of trying, you know, hopeful that we're going to be recovering sooner than later. You know, it's been, in this environment, it's really difficult to really project where tourism is going to be. In FY23 was the first time that we had exceeded 1 million in plane packs since pre-COVID. excuse me, in FY23, we had 859,000 packs, in plain packs. Pre-COVID, we had 1.85. In FY24 was the first time we exceeded a million, right? So we went from 859 to 1,050,000. So at the point that we hit 1,050,000, right, you know, the hope, of course, is that we saw only 859. Perhaps we'll be able to hit more than 1,050,000 in FY25, but that wasn't the case. It actually remained flat. And then it continues to be pretty flat again for FY26. And for FY27, although we're projecting by the airlines to see probably a 50,000 packs increase in next fiscal year, it's still pretty flat and it's not where we need to be. And so, you know, although, again, for this fiscal year, we started out very strong, and in fact, if we had continued to trend where we were in the first quarter through the rest of the year, we'd be pretty close to 1.2 million enplanements. Just shy of it, maybe 1.17, 1.18, right, but they're pretty close. If we had continued on the track that we were and we started in this fiscal year. And that just didn't happen, and that's, you know, of course, we're here today because of that.
Yeah, and I think there's a big conversation out in the community about whether or not we can realistically expect a return to, you know, the golden era of tourism, because I think there's just so many global factors, and then you have the kind of the changing of the mindset of the world travelers. They're not really looking for the duty-free shoppers or the luxury destinations. They're actually looking for, you know, ecological, you know, cultural type tourism, and I think we're in a position like that's what we're all about. But we have our obvious, you know, struggles in just maintaining the destination. What I wanted to ask is there was a lot of discussion recently in the media as the chair of the tourism committee has called for the resignation of the president, CEO of the Guam Visitors Bureau, citing different failures to include, you know, not getting the doggons in the seats to come to Guam, even though we appropriated the airline incentives. So I just kind of wanted to ask, how does that make you feel? And are you also worried that someone might be calling for your resignation over these, you know, very similar issues? I mean, they're kind of interconnected. And just to be clear, I'm not. I'm just curious how you feel about that.
Well, Senator, good question. I know in our part, as far as the GIA's part, we're consistently going out there to try and entice airlines to come in. We do have the seat capacities coming in, and the issue that we have is that the seat capacities, the load factors are not being filled. So GIA is doing their part. We go out and entice more flights, more airlines to come in. And filling up those seats is where our issue is.
Do you think that the airport shares in some of the failures that were cited by the tourism chair relative to his calling for the resignation of the GVB president and CEO?
Well, I know we're doing our part in making sure that the passenger experience, when they do come in, that we provide a clean, safe, and secure airport, and we continue to do that. You see the progress that we've done with the floors, the loading bridges that are going to be changed out. We have 5 that are coming in January of this year. Those are going to be changed. So we're continuing to improve the airport so that when the passengers do come in, they have a good experience of coming in and leaving.
Do you think that all of the different tools that we've given the airport relative to the flexibility with the leases and the concession and other types of contracts, do you think that those measures will end up in the long term generating enough revenue to offset some of these challenges that we're facing with the global trends, et cetera?
I see that as positive, yes. We're in the process now. And although we're not going to see the fruits of those concessions coming in this real soon, but I think down the line within the next year, you're going to see that starting to increase in as far as the leases is concerned.
Thank you for the information. I was just kind of thinking last night as we're in this, and I don't really think it's a downturn in tourism. I think it's a whole new world, and we have to figure out how to take advantage of what we offer as a destination. And really, in MAGA'HAGŭ, Guam, to me, it's really simple. We just have to It's about the destination management, and if they come to the airport and you guys fixed up the airport, but they come out to an island that's, we got an abandoned hotel right down the street from the airport, we got abandoned vehicles all over the place, this doesn't really make sense. So I kind of wanted to ask, with the fees, I know we're experiencing the challenges, but it kind of seems to me like these would go up eventually in the long term. So is this the time to consider any type of increase? Not 150% increase, but just any type of increase, really.
From my standpoint, Senator, any increase is tough, right? So from GIA's part, we're doing everything we can to make sure that we cut as much expenses as we can so that the fees don't increase. Sometimes it's beyond our control that these things that are being charged have to be incorporated.
Yeah, because we've got the flexibility that we've given you, and you're saying that it's going to take a few fiscal years to generate that revenue. So I'm just curious if we need to increase these rates at all, not by 150%, but for the long term. So thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to ask questions this morning.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Chala'i, you recognize.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just want to follow up on a couple of things. So first of all, I think when we were doing the GVB incentive, or the 10 million, GIAA had testified that they had also offered an incentive to the airlines at that time. So what happened with that? It was not effective, or what? How would you report on that right now?
So those incentive programs already has ceased since December of 2025.
Right.
And those incentive programs were for new routes coming into Guam and also new airlines coming in. So those incentives were given to those airlines or those carriers that had new flights coming into Guam. And also one of the requirements that it is underserved locations that were coming.
All right, and you're talking about the GIAA incentives, right?
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
So how much was it, and what did you think the benefit was in the end?
I don't have that cost, ma'am, but we can get that to you.
So was it a negative or a positive?
For the Korean market, I think we provided a 30% incentive, and I think GVB supplemented that with an additional 20%, giving the Korean carriers 50% at that time. And that expired again at the end of the year.
I just want to know what we got for those incentives. Yeah, like a report. What is the end like? So do we know in the future those work, they did not work, or yeah, what's the report on the money that we spent?
Yeah, Senator. So I don't have the exact figures in front of me, and maybe we can provide that for you. But the objective of the incentive is obviously to create more routes, more capacity from new destinations.
Yes,
or
I know.
More services from destination origins. And I think in that sense, it did. And I think if you recall, the Korean market, there was an expansion of capacity during that time. In addition, we actually had a service that started out of Cebu by Philippine Airlines. All these are all new market. But I think, it is also, the sustainability is also a function of demand, and I think that's where the marketing comes in as well.
So did any of those new routes stick? None. All right. And then I guess I'm going to just go back to the basics, and I'm sorry if it sounds repetitive, but it's very kind of hard to get our heads around this. But it looks like we don't see the budget here for 2025, but it's been said by the panel that the budget is higher than the actuals for 2025. That's the case for 2026. And so that's at least 2 years. We don't have the info going back even further. But so it's like negative for 2 years. Did we cut our expenses too late? Right? Because you're saying you're trying to cut your expenses now. It sounds like you might cut $1 million or $2 million at the most. versus 27 million that you need?
Right. So actually, with regards to expense or cost containment, this fiscal year wasn't the first time or the earliest that we began. Of course, I began with the airport in November 2023, but definitely in FY24, there was already, there was actually a memo that was issued by the executive manager regarding cost containment and making sure that everybody continues to look at that. So regarding cost containment, it's not that we just started in FY25 or 6. Those are things that have been ongoing.
Right. But it sounds like you're saving only about $1 million.
Realistically, of course, because we are a huge facility with a lot of repairs and things that need to be maintained, yes, the savings, of course, it's perhaps, but again, we've continuously come in below budget because we've not been hiring to the levels that have been approved in terms of our vacancies. And also, again, but we have looked at the different areas to cut costs. And for FY26, at least, we could say that it's to the tune of, well over our 1.5 million that we've been able to save just in FY26.
All right. I know that's a lot of savings, 1.5 million, but when you compare it to 27 million, then it just kind of fades, right? So that's really the drasticness of this request. Mr. Byrne, can I just ask you something? Is there any more federal funds that can be used to match the FAA CIP projects that they have?
So which kind of federal, if you're talking about ARPA funds, no.
I don't know, because they're saying it's a CIP project. Yes. FAA is going to pay part of it, then they need to pay $9 million. That they've put that off for a while now, and now it's due.
Yes.
And nothing there.
That's correct.
Anything left?
No.
Nowhere?
Nowhere, no.
All right. And so I know it's probably more complex than this, because you've been explaining it, but I'm just going to say it how I can see it. If you predicted the same amount that you predicted in 2026, your rates would be, the same budget, your rates, you predicted the same amount of passengers, and your in-plane passenger cost would be $34.99. We are predicting less than what you predicted in 2026 in plane passengers by 100,000, and yet your in-plane passenger costs are going up, like you said, 100% or something, 150%. So can we just do status quo? I think I hear you didn't put any money aside for this $9 million that's due for the CIP FAA project, so maybe take that away. And if we reimburse the $9 million in fuel costs, you can use that, right? But what about, why can't we do status quo? Why can't you do status quo if you're predicting even less passengers than you predicted in 2026? And at that time, you were able to entertain the cost per passenger at $34.99 instead of $55.
Thank you so much, Senator Terlahi, for that question. I first want to go back to your original question regarding how much were the incentives that were provided. We have that information. For FY 2025, it was $941,087. For FY 26, it was $1,031,738. So those were the incentives that were provided to the airlines for FY 25 and 26. And regarding your question as to why it cannot be status quo, the reality is even for FY 26, we're considering a rate adjustment if we're not able to get any funding. So even for FY 26, what we're saying today is that we cannot be status quo in order for us to be able to meet what's required for our bonds, right? So in terms of this status quo for FY26, again, we can't even be status quo in terms of our rates. So that's why, when we come into FY27, and trying to address the issues of the additional $9 million in FIA-funded projects, that's our share that we are going to have, again, it's not possible. The process or the rate methodology that's used for airports is it's basically a cost recovery. So the idea and behind the airline agreements is that the airlines, and this is not unique to Guam, but the airlines cover the O&M and then the other cash outlays, for example, for capital, our shared capital projects, our debt service, et cetera, right? And then, of course, in return, the airlines consult with the airport, and they have a say. But yeah, to go back to your question regarding status quo, even for FY26, what we're coming today and have been coming today to the legislature over the last couple of days, our message is that status quo even can continue in this fiscal year.
Senator, to put that in context, in value, the $34 rate for the last 2 months of FY26 would have to go up to $68. That would be, 68 would be the status quo.
Then how did it go down? It looks like it went down in FY26.
Would you let me know which page you're referring to, ma'am?
Page 1 of 3, your signatory airline cost per plane passengers, you were budgeted at $34.99, but it actually went, you're saying the actual was $34.62.
Okay. So regarding the $34.62, just hold on just a second. There's a few things I wanted to just point out. With regards to the budget, the 2026 budget, the $34.99, one thing to take note of is we had budgeted for a $3 million defeasance. So really, what we did not do is pass on that $3 million to the airlines. So that is important to note, right? So if we had passed that on and we didn't budget for that in fiscal year 2026, the rate really would have been $37.99 and not $34.99. That's kind of the first thing. Regarding the okay, and to talk about total revenues versus the airline revenues only, if you refer to page 3 of 3, you'll see that our total revenues that we're projecting, actual estimate, is $67.97 million versus what we had projected of 78.3, and that's approximately what we're saying is our total revenue shortfall, which is between, again, 10.3 to 12.5, which is in the transmittal letter that the manager had sent to Chairman GUHNS after our oversight hearing. How the CPE works is the CPE is representative of what the total signatory revenues are that we're projecting to get from all of the different fees that we charge, divided by the in-plane packs. That's how we're getting $34.62. The CPE does not directly take into consideration all of the other revenues that is generated, right? Because again, it's really just based on what's charged to the airlines. And as I said to earlier in Speaker Balaz's line of questions, how it works is, of course, as we work to project what our O&M is or what our total revenues are that we're trying to generate to cover not just our operation and maintenance expenses, but also our debt service and then our O&M.
All right, can we just stop there?
Sure.
Did you cover those for FY24 to FY25 and FY26?
So in FY26, when we projected, we put it in the budget. We put an amount in the budget. Those were not able to be covered, no.
All right, so even with your adjustment, I guess that's why I'm trying to figure out why did your per passenger cost go down instead of up?
Here we go. So regarding, so basically, and perhaps maybe in the budget, the $34.99 versus the actual, that $34.62 is really representative of only what the shortfall is that we're going to have when we just utilize only the shortfall in the signatory airline rates and fees. But I understand kind of what you're trying to get at, which is if it's $34.99, why are you saying you're going to, for the last 2 months of the year, try to recover $68 million? And that is because whatever really the shortfall is in our total revenues that we're going to have to recover, we have an agreement with the airlines that they will cover our cost. The budget process, again, involves cost recovery, and anything that we're able to generate outside of aeronautical revenues, what's directly charged to the airlines, those actually help the airlines because then those actually get deducted from the amount that we charge them in the rates. So when we're not making those, then what we're trying to make up is not just that $34.62 versus $34.99 that you're seeing there. We're actually trying to make up everything to include all the non-aeronautical revenues that is not also being generated. And that's why, again, I understand what you're saying. I see that kind of gap. But to clarify, yes, although you're seeing $34.62 here, that's just based on that CPE if we're only considering that. But what we're trying to actually recover is all of the revenues, that's the entire revenue shortfall, which is really the $10 million or so.
You didn't do that last year. You didn't try to do that last year.
Well, and the reason why, so as I mentioned, and it is a little bit of a complicated kind of process, there's a lot of factors. Our debt service at one point, I think, was like in the 7 million range, then it went to 11 million, and I believe in FY25 was supposed to be 18 million. If you look at our actual debt service for FY25, it ended up being in the $12 million range. That's a $6 million difference from how much it should have been.
Did you budget for 18 million?
We had budgeted in FY25. We likely did budget for 18 million.
Right?
Hold on just a second. Let me find out.
And that's why this is not making sense to me.
But what we did do in order to make up that shortfall, ma'am, is, as I mentioned, we had done some bond transactions. Those bond transactions that we did allowed for us, and their tools that allowed for us to be able to meet our debt service coverage ratio so that we would not have to pass on what we would have had to pass on, which would have been to the tune of, if we saved $6 million, so $6, right, CPE, that we wouldn't have had to pass on at that time. So we actually have been utilizing tools to try to help to not increase the rates and to continue to meet our debt service coverage ratio. But where we are is that we've utilized those tools already. And now where we are is we would actually, for this fiscal year, need to do a defeasance of $8 million to be able to meet the debt service coverage ratio for this year. In FY25, we did a $3 million defeasance, plus we had a standalone tender that also allowed for us to reduce our debt service, our debt service by, I think, another 3.
I thought you said you're not able to do another defeasance. Are you? I saw it on the agenda for your board.
What I mean is we need to do a defeasance in FY26.
So you're going to do, what did you say, how much?
To the tune of
8
8.8. We asked the board to approve up to 9 million, but we believe 8.8 million.
All right, and even with that, you're still going to need to increase the cost per passenger for the rest of FY26?
No, with that money, we won't have to do that.
Okay, so why can't we do status quo in FY27?
So why we can't do status quo for FY27 is because we need to not only recover our cost, but we also need to recover $18.6 million in our debt service. And then we're trying to recover, if you recall, we went through the process.
Sorry, Daphne, but you already budgeted for that $18 million in FY25 and 26.
Right, but that's annual debt service. That's how much we pay each year.
So again, it's going to be there in 27, but it shouldn't increase. It should be status quo because you've already budgeted for those things. I mean, the amounts shouldn't change that drastically because you had budgeted for that in 25 and 26.
But our actual debt service in FY25 ended up being 12, even though we may have budgeted for 26. And so that's why, even though we were not meeting the annual and plain packs for the year, or what we had projected, we were able to find a way to adjust.
But I'm just saying, if you use your budgeted amount, right? Like you had predicted you're going to pay 18 million in bonds, and that this is going to be the cost that you need to recover, right? So I'm just saying, if this should be the same thing, that you have to pay 18 million again this year. Your budget should look very similar because you have to recover the 18 million, and except maybe for this 9 that you guys put off and haven't put aside when you knew it was due this year, right? That CIP project?
But each year, though, ma'am, and just to kind of go back to our discussion 2 days ago, and the reason why we're trying to raise or generate 92.89 million versus the 78.3. And the difference in those numbers is approximately $15 million, right? And where the difference is because we did budget in FY26 for an O&M reserve, right, to help fill it of $6 million. But in FY27, because we did not recover, we're not able to recover that, now we're having to try to recover $12 million to fill our O&M reserve. So the difference is 6. In addition to that, of course, we had the $3 million increase in our expenses, which we've already found savings for, but that's also part of the difference. And then in addition to that, what we had budgeted in FY26 for our capital improvement projects was $5 million, but this year we're budgeting $9 million. And so the 9 plus 4 plus, the 4 plus the 3 plus the 6, which is the difference, is about 13 approximately, right? And perhaps there's a few areas where I'm not, but again, that's the primary difference is because although we did budget it in FY26, we actually did not recover those. And so now in FY27, we're trying to recover them so that way we can make sure that we have all these monies to pay out things and we have our reserves in the proper levels that they should be.
I guess it's just a little bit hard to believe that all of these costs are going to be put in 1 year, like all your debt from 25, 26, 27, or 25, 26, I don't know, before that you didn't make up, are now going to be put all, like they weren't, like you didn't meet your O&M, right? Or what did you call it? The O&M? Reserve in 26? You didn't meet it in 25 either? And can you go one more year without meeting that
just
in
to share with you,
2027?
though, ma'am, 2 years ago in FY24, we had, if you want to call it a net loss for simplicity purposes, right, what we usually call it, we had a net loss 2 years ago to the tune of $30 million, I believe, or 3 years ago, FY24. And then FY25, I have to take it back. 3 years ago, we had a net loss of, I think, $31 million, because when I came into the airport, we were doing the FY23 audit. In FY24, we actually cut that in half, perhaps to around 15 or so million. And then in this fiscal year, I believe we have finally come to a point where we don't have a net loss. I think it's just a very small net income that we have, right? So, we actually have not been able to make the revenues to cover our expenses and other cash outlays for the last several years. Now what we're seeing is an accumulation of those shortages over time and us trying to fill, because we have been trying to fill it each year, but it's not been possible, right?
Right. Yes, I see that you're trying to, it's accumulated and now you want to take care of it, but you were okay not taking care of it in 25 or 26. That, the sky did not fall, even though you didn't meet your reserve, right? And are we able to let that live for 27 as well?
Right, but at that time, yes, you're right, we were able to, but, again, over time, we actually had built up some savings and reserves. We were able to utilize that, but also what I mentioned the other day, during COVID, there was federal aid. And around FY24, when all the other airports across the country were probably coming back to not just pre-COVID levels, but some of them even better, and federal aid ceased, for those airports, it wasn't an issue. During COVID, we actually were able to receive monies that helped us, and of course, that ended up translating into no increases or smaller increases to the airlines, right? So they benefited as well. But when that stopped in around FY24 and there is no federal aid, then of course there is going to result in some challenge, because the gap that from what we used to receive or what we were receiving in federal aid is no longer being funded. And again, that happened approximately around FY24-ish.
I know. Okay, so what you're saying is kind of that this might go on forever, that the general fund is going to have to subsidize the airport if that's the case, because you had to rely on federal funds. There are no more federal funds, and that there's no other way to go forward except through a general fund appropriation. And that's just what worries me, is that how permanent this looks. And so if I can just go back to the lease revenue. So you're trying to make up a shortfall of what you want is 92. Again, I can't understand how your costs have gone up to 92 versus, well, this says revenue, 92 versus 78 in 2026, and why you can't do a status quo or get closer to that status quo. And you say because this year you want to make up for this reserve and the 9 million CIP that have been put off, and an additional, sounds like 33 million, anyways, 15 million. But, I was thinking to call Gita and see, is this really the best that you can't make up for the shortfall? You've got all the authority. You've put out an RFP, I think, for your concessions, right? You put an RFP out for your lands, and or you're just open to whatever anybody requests for use of the land. And I guess I'm just surprised that we're going to operate and not make those properties cover your expenses if your expenses are going to continue to increase. Otherwise, this looks like a permanent situation to me where
to clarify, if you want to, to refer to our expenses, you'll go to Exhibit D, and there's just one page to that. And in Exhibit D, you'll see what our actual expenses have been for the last few years, or our actual for FY25, our actual, what we're estimating with FY26, and then our proposed budget for FY27.
Okay, so it's the same, 57 plus 3 million, 60, right?
Right.
So that's why I keep asking, why can't you do status quo then? Because you want to cover all these extra things that were put off for years, right?
Because if you look at...
But why do you put all this revenue? Why did you put like 20 million in revenue?
But if you look actually at our FY20, if you look at our proposed rates and fees, which has this blue, you'll see what our debt service was in those years. So for fiscal year 2025, our debt service was approved or budgeted at 18.6.
Yes.
We were not making the revenues in order to be able to cover that. What we did do was we did a defeasance and a standalone tender that helped to reduce, so that's $6 CPE that we did not, or $6 million we did not have to pass to our airlines. Before fiscal year 25, there was a year where our debt service was like 7 million and also 11 million. And then after that, of course, it shot up to 18 million, and now we're at 18 million. So, again, there's a combination of a lot of things happening. Us not being able to recover these, even though we've budgeted for the O&M reserve, and we've also budgeted for our cash-funded projects. And of course,
that's my concern. It's like we're not able to recover for several years now, and you're using other tools, which I applaud you, that's creative. The problem is, if we're not able to recover for like 3 years in a row now, and we still have this high debt service, and we're still looking even next year to me at this, if we're not going to make it up. And I guess I want to know, I understand you want to give the airlines a budget like now that looks like it's not going to be so high on the employment costs, right? But for so we're going to cover, you want us to cover FY27, but I can't see how, with that model, you're going to recover enough to not have the same situation in FY28 unless your leases come through with some, revenue, additional revenue. But it looks like you've already budgeted some of that revenue, and so this is the max that you're going to get, and you're still negative.
Well, and of course, if there are more passengers, then that will also help as well, right? Because we're projecting 1.1. And again, it is difficult in the environment we are to
1.1 is less than what you projected last year.
Correct.
So that's like status quo to me, or less. And you're saying you can't live with status quo. You want to live above the status quo budget, and that's really what's concerning. I can't see how this is sustainable for Guam, like in any way, unless you guys are going to tell us you're not going to settle for anything less on these land leases, because otherwise it's the general fund also subsidizing whoever's getting those leases, because those leases are not even covering your costs, right? So we're going to subsidize. I don't know. I just can't see the end of it. I can't see how this turns. We can, yeah. Anyways, I guess my time is up, so thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Salas Matsunari, you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly can understand the concerns of the previous speaker regarding what might happen in the future, but I think we're here to discuss what's happening right now and the crisis situation that the airport is dealing with. And so my question really is just to get straight to the point. Are you looking at, do you need 17 million or do you need 27 million approved in this bill?
Ma'am, we are looking at 27 million. If we wanted to get down to the 34.99 CPE, 27 million is what we would need.
And if you only get 17 million, what would the cost per in-plane passengers?
So we're looking at the CPE about 43, 41.
Have you met with the airlines again since Friday, and are they comfortable with the 44 or
no,
not
ma'am, they're not comfortable at all with 44. Anything beyond what they're paying now at 34.99 is what they would like to have. If it can go even lower, then that's it. But in order to get to our 34.99, that 27 million is what the target would be.
So if we only approve 17 million, again, it would be, we're going to see all these rate increases go into effect, but not as high as what's in the budget you've presented.
Yes, ma'am.
The CPE would only go down to 44.
43.41.
Okay. So I do have a question, just a follow-up question to BBMR. The other day I had asked about the Governor's Transfer Authority in the current budget to deal with the airport arrearages for the fuel tax. And you'd mentioned that it's an authorization without an appropriation. Correct. That's correct.
That's correct, ma'am.
So any transfer authority and any other bill that might come out of this legislature, is it really just a wasted language?
Yes. Yes.
So us giving the governor 50% transfer authority was wasted language?
Remember that when that language is approved, it's approved at the beginning of the fiscal year. And so we really don't know until the third quarter, fourth quarter, where we are with expenditures. And, you know, in theory, it's a tool, but in reality, this year especially, it's a tool that doesn't have any teeth to it.
And so we're coming toward the end of this fiscal year. There's nothing that can be transferred to the airport?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Barnes, Ranking Member. Senator San Agustin, you recognize.
Mr. Chairman, just like thank the body for being here, the panel. And like I asked yesterday for commitment. Don't worry, because I got the amendment in. Then we work it from there. All right? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator San Agustin. Senator Cabo, you recognize.
Havade buenas, everyone. Thank you. Airport, thank you, BBMR and DOA for being here. Mr. Chair, I just have a few questions.
Please proceed.
Airport, please indulge me. Some of the questions may have been asked already before, but just for the record, I just wanted to ask a couple. You know, this budget shortfall, I wanted to ask if you have experienced similar budget shortfalls over the years?
No, this is not something that we've experienced as far as I understand.
So it's unique. It's the first time, but it's a big bailout. And at the rate we're going, you know, we're trying to figure out where to distribute resources. I think, you know, what we're doing here is very relevant. So the solution that you came up with was, I guess one of the solutions is to raise airport fees, right? So if we're not able to provide this assistance, chances are that's the only solution that we're confronted with at the moment.
Right, and so our airline agreements actually have a provision that allows for us to do that. And of course, you know, as part of our airline agreement, our airlines have actually, you know, they basically agree to cover what our expenses and other cash outlays are. So yes, that is for FY 2026. That's how we're going to be able to recover. And of course, for FY 2027, you know, of course, we have not yet implemented or finalized our rates, but you know, that's something that is contemplated as a rate increase so that we can be able to meet our the necessary cash outlays that we have.
So granting we allocate the whole amount. I'm just going to go hypothetically speaking. If you receive the whole amount, then so we are not going to increase fees, but this amount will be exhausted right away, right? I mean, because of the obligations, these amounts are already allocated to go somewhere. So when that happens and the airport has not recuperated, are we going to go back again and say we need to raise the airport fees? Chances are.
Well, I mean, of course, again, what we're talking about in this particular appropriation, and even the actual, not just the bill, but of course what we have mentioned, which is 27 million. What we're talking about today is really just addressing the issue of FY26 and FY27. And, you know, as I think has been discussed, is that, of course, there's a larger, you know, a larger challenge that's not really just truly just like limited to where the airport is. You know, yes, there has to be some look at our expenses and what it is that, you know, is the minimum level perhaps that we can, you know, operate at. But, you know, even at that, we are a very large facility. We have, you know, tens of thousands of, maybe 100,000 of square feet of a building, but also we have all this property that spans across Tizen, goes up toward Capitol Kitchen. We have a huge property that requires a lot of maintenance, and that maintenance comes with a cost, right? So again, what we're talking about today is really FY26 and 27. In terms of, you know, the plan going forward, it's really going to be kind of a larger discussion, not just with the airport, but, you know, with other agencies to see how we might be able to get air traffic to increase, how we might be able to entice the airlines and get more seats, how we might be able to, you know, again, become, you know, get back to pre-COVID levels. And also, I think, as been discussed earlier, which is, you know, to utilize the tools that this particular legislature, in fact, has given to us to make sure that we maximize non-aeronautical revenues, right? So those are all the things that have to get done. But yes, today we're talking about FY26 and 27. And in accounting, we like to say, you know, we don't have a crystal ball. It's difficult to say moving forward. But, you know, that's really something that it takes immediate, you know, discussion and addressing.
Okay, I was going to ask that question actually. What's your long-term plan, or at least your 3-year to 5-year plan? If you wanted to inject, or anybody can inject further information, please do so.
Well, really, there's been a lot of discussion, and of course, we are not the Guam Visitors Bureau, but I know even for them, they have talked with different, perhaps different organizations about other potential targets in terms of markets, right, in Asia, outside of Japan and Korea. And those types of things are definitely things that we, are going to have to look at. I think some things that also have been discussed here is what types of travelers we have now and what types of experiences people are looking for. The luxury market perhaps is a little bit of a different, it's not the same type of market that we had before, and as people travel, they like to go to different types of places. They like to do these, food tours, bike tours, cultural tours, right? So again, it's just kind of looking at things from it's a whole government community approach, right, as opposed to a single agency approach.
Since you mentioned it, obviously there's a constant coordination with GVB with these efforts, right? What are the current markets that you guys are looking at the moment?
Well, one of the markets, Senator, we're looking at is hopefully getting, and we've gone a long way with the Guam Cinema visa waiver with the Philippines. And if that comes to fruition, I think we're going to see a big return of that, where a lot of Filipino visitors will travel to Guam. We got the briefing from the Philippine government that when they did that visa waiver with Taiwan, the first year that they did a waiver, they attracted like 80,000 Filipinos to Taiwan. And in 5 years, it went up from 80,000 to 800,000 visiting a year. So hopefully we can attract that kind of traffic.
So basically, what is GIAA's role and strategy in supporting Guam's tourism recovery and increasing passenger traffic? What is your role? I know that earlier it was mentioned that there were incentive programs parallel to GVB. What other type of initiatives does GIAA do alongside GVB?
Well, definitely we've been trying to get airlines to add more flights to Guam. We've got that. Matter of fact, in the month of August, there's a lot of the airlines now that are picking up their flights from, like one of the airlines is going from 4 times a week to daily flights now. Korean Airlines is not only going from 4 times a week to daily, but they're also adding on the morning flights. And so we're adding airline seat capacity. We just need to make sure that we fill those seats.
Beyond what we have right now and the initiative in the Philippines, are there other markets that we're trying to go after?
There's definitely other markets that we're trying. We're looking at other locations that have visa waivers with the United States or with Guam. So we're looking at those markets also.
Thank you. I wanted to circle back to my earlier question with regards to the fees. Hypothetically speaking again, what happens if you don't receive the full amount requested or the whole ask? What if it's just partial? How would GIAA tackle the pending responsibilities that we need to address?
Well, for FY26, we definitely need a minimum of $8.8 to $9 million. Otherwise, for FY26, we're going to have to try to recover that from the airlines, and that will happen immediately. Our budget is actually, and our rates have to be approved by the board by August 31 in order for them to go into effect on October 1. And so, of course, this particular legislation is critical so that way we can make sure that we are able to put into the budget or we know or have some definite amounts that we put into the budget with regards to what the CPE is going to be, again, based on the legislation. So, you know, if it's just partial, then, you know, it may not allow for us to be able to maintain rates for the airlines.
Thank you. Do we see an increase in non-airline revenues?
Well, right now we actually have some active solicitations that are ongoing for our concessions. They are for our specialty retail, they're for our car concessions, and also for our F&B. You know, of course, our job at the airport is to make sure that we always act in the best interest of the authority. And, you know, of course, as we move forward with these solicitations, that is the goal. But, you know, those are still actively ongoing. And so, you know, that's something that, you know, of course, we're hopeful that we're going to see increases in them, but really at this time, you know, it's unknown because we are still in the solicitation, active solicitation process.
Right now, because I could see at the moment if there is a struggle to bring in more passengers, it could be a good means to find revenue where, you know, in parallels, we do initiatives in that, like more active, more robust, going after that other side of the fence, not just for the passenger side, right? Just so we can continue to support the operations of the airport. Would you say that some of these contracts or these solicitations are going to be in fruition soon? Is there a little hope, at least, you know, at the end of the tunnel?
Well, that's the goal, but of course, what we know is that the F&B contracts actually F&B and car concessions expire at this month. And then, of course, this body did allow for or enact legislation to extend our specialty retail contract up to 3 years. So, I mean, that's what we do know. But of course, the goal is to try to complete things as soon as possible. And that's what the airport authority is trying to do. But I also wanted to go back to your comment, Senator, regarding trying to achieve or get more monies. So we have been, for our rental properties, we've been publishing what are called notice to solicit interest, so that that way, you know, the public is aware that we have properties that are available. And again, that's something you'll find on our website. That's something we published in the paper. We also have a program called CAP, which at this point, I don't recall what CAP means, but basically we allow for Concourse Access Pass. Thank you, Mr. Iam. So we allow for non-passengers to come into our airport, to go into the concourse, the space beyond TSA. They can come and they can shop. So you could go to the different stores there. You can eat an F&B there. You can even, of course, a lot of times I think people are really, you know, also going in to see their family members off right at the gates. But, you know, so, and that's, again, those are things that the authority has been trying to, has been looking at or has been putting into place so that we can try to get some additional revenues to be generated.
Thank you for bringing up that issue on the floor. I remember this was launched just recently, right? And how is that working out so far?
Well, of course, I think back in May when it was initially launched, that was Mother's Day time, and so I think we got a pretty good reaction at that time because there was a lot of people trying to buy things for Mother's Day. You know, of course, things have been a little bit slow, so the last few months has been more what we call like soft performance. But you know, there are people that are coming into the concourse and they are still continuing to buy things, and those are people who wouldn't have bought things before. So you know, any additional dollar that comes in because of that is incremental, right? Those are additional that comes in to help us.
Or any foot traffic. You know, people like sale. And I walk through there and there's normally, every time I walk by, there are always sales. So those are things good to advertise if we really want to pump up, you know, foot traffic. I know it's a new initiative, and hopefully there are other initiatives, creative like this one, that we can think of just to help the airport. But it's a big ask, so I hope that you guys can come up with other initiative than raising the fees, because the fees will tend to have a ripple effect on the cost of airline tickets, which we don't really want to happen for our community. Anyway, that's all I have at the moment. Good luck, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to raise these questions. Thank you for indulging my questions.
Thank you, Senator. Senator TYPHOON, you're recognized.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here. You know, yesterday when we were talking about the rate increase going from almost to 160%, I'm looking at other jurisdictions, and actually I went further and find out if other jurisdictions or other airports in the Asian area has been bailed out by the government. And it's basically showing none. Only during COVID, during the time of COVID, that they were able to assist because of some government money, or even on Guam side, we had federal money. Now we're in a situation that, to me, whenever you're running a business, you have what's called a rainy day fund. You know, it's always been my thing to make sure that's always covered. Every year you put it aside. And you do have that account. What was the account? You're supposed to have like 1.2% of the operating cost in a fund. And what is the name of that fund?
It's 25% of our operation and maintenance expenses, which is called our O&M reserve.
Oh, a minute, yeah. So it's called, what is the fund called again?
O&M reserve.
Reserved. Okay, the O&M reserves. Okay. So here, you know, actually I have to tell you, I've got people calling me up and said somebody had a strategy, you know, at the airport because of their failure of having austerity measures put in place and having, being, you know, not in a reality of what could happen, because typhoons come. They always come. And you have to set aside funding for that. A drop, the yen, the won, they're still in, you know, they're still low. So you're looking at the, you know, the situation in the Asia, which we get a lot of our passengers from, and you kind of adjust to that predicament. Now, I know in December, your increase in passengers was one of the highest, if I'm not mistaken, last December, right? Is that true? Okay. But that predicament probably gave you the feeling that, you know, things are getting better and going to move forward, so you didn't feel there were austere measures that need to be in place. But for any airline, as I do the research on airlines, because we're not experts, you guys basically sit there every day and you know you know how airlines work, but it's clear that airports make sure that in the event there is a situation, gas prices going up, a typhoon or any kind of, you know, like epic fury coming in, a situation where war, because there's tension between China and the United States, even North Korea. Remember when that happened? People were afraid about coming to Guam because we were a target. So and then I looked at some of your operating expenses, and I noticed that there were huge increases in certain areas, and I think the speaker mentioned that earlier. So I decided to look a little bit more and see where those increases were. Then I realized that the majority of it really that you're having problem is your debt service. Now these particular bonds were the last one of what, 10 years ago that the port had borrowed from, right? 10 years ago. Is that true, Daphne? Was the last bond that you got about 10 years ago or more?
2013.
2013. So it was quite a while ago, you know, during a time that actually was still looking good for Guam before COVID. So now we're looking at issues here that really are not so much, I mean, yeah, you can make some cuts in your operating expenses, but the biggest part here is your debt service. That's the biggest issue here. Is that correct?
The increase in our debt service, yes, in the last couple of years.
Exactly. So even if you were to cut, let's say, certain things, or even shut down half of the airport and use some, right? That's still not enough to cover those debt services. Is that right? I mean, just on your bare necessities at the airport, if you to cut all the way to that, that's still not enough.
As I mentioned earlier, of course, the airport is a huge facility with lots of, and our primary mission at the airport is safety and security, right? Making sure that we have a safe and secure environment for our passengers. Not only that, but we've actually also become a very critical piece of this whole, in terms of defense. And if you'll notice, we've had multiple exercises that have occurred that the airport has participated. You'll see that more recently there have been several military aircraft that you'll see coming out of our airport. So the airport's primary mission is really safety and security. And historically, we've been able to cover our expenses through the revenues, of course, through our airlines. Of course, as we hit COVID, and now, as Mr. Speaker had mentioned earlier, yes, perhaps we're in a different environment, right? And that takes some looking at. But where we are is, yes, our debt service, when we had done some bond restructuring or debt restructuring back in 2019, even ahead of COVID, that was actually quite helpful as we got into COVID because, we were able to have lower or reduced levels of debt at that time. I think 7 million in one year, 11 million in the other before it shot up to 18.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to stay in that particular question. We're moving in another direction, and that's talking about something else. I'm just asking about, even if you were to make major cuts at the airport, would that still be able to help your debts, cover your debt services?
Our debt service is 18.6 million, right. And of course, it's a huge piece of what we are trying to make sure we cover. So,
can you cut enough operations at the airport?
We can only cut so much at the airport, right? Because again, we're a facility that requires a lot of maintenance. Right. We're also a facility that's highly regulated, and where we have to make sure, like as an example, we have aging infrastructure. And, to cut on costs or to help to save on cash, what we have done is deferred some maintenance. But those deferred maintenance really over time result in increased costs of maintenance, right? What we have in our budget, and thank you for pointing it out, we do have some expenses that did increase, but earlier I did mention during Senator Gumatauto's questioning time that what we did include were things like our two-way radios, which we do work to tie into GPD's radio system, and which we've had challenges with. And of course, if our firefighters and our police are in our terminal and their two-way radios are not working, it causes a safety issue for them as they're trying to deal with a certain situation in the airport. So the things, again, we're an agency that our primary mission is safety and security, but we're also, of course, critical to
Okay, so let's just go back
traffic.
to the question again, Daphne. How much percentage can you cut in operating expenses at the airport? What percentage more can you guys cut?
Well, what we did already was we looked to cut $3 million. We've had status quo budget for the last 2 years, Senator. There are some expenses, of course, like benefits, retirement, right, which we have no control over. Health insurance, the government share, we don't have control over. Those are costs that we
Can you
must
cut at least
cover.
25% in operating costs at the airport?
I believe that 25% is way too deep to cut. And I think that would actually cause us to compromise the safety and us to be able to manage the airport.
10%?
And I couldn't at this point say, but what I am saying is earlier we had talked about 60 million in operating expenses. That was what we started with FY27. We were able to cut at least 3 million already, so we're down to 57 million, right? And we're still trying to look for some additional cuts But right now, where we are for this coming fiscal year is we're at 57, and we're working to cut a little bit more. And I want to go back to your comment
that's what I was
with regards
talking
to no
about.
austerity measures, because really, you know, again, since I've been at the airport, and I'm pretty confident ahead of that there have been moves to look at, you know, how we can do cost containment. And with regards to cost containment in particular this year, as I mentioned, we have actually, in terms of our retention, in terms of our just retention and not hiring to the level of our budget, we've actually saved over 1.5 million, perhaps even closer to 2. And so, again, what I'd like to say is that, you know, we have been working to identify areas to cut. I've actually had meetings with our APD. I have gone to the airport 5:30 in the morning Tuesday, 5:30 in the morning yesterday, and I even was at the airport 5:30 at night Tuesday and 5:30 last night, because I'm talking with our team individually with the shifts about what this means to the airport. And my goal is to talk with every single one of our employees to make sure that they understand. And you know what I've told them, and what I want to share is that the airport, our team is a very high-performing team. Our team is one that makes sure that our primary and core mission is done. We are currently in a situation that perhaps is not ideal, not only for the airport, but for all of us. In good times, the airport has been able to not only cover, but of course probably do a whole lot of things. And in terms of our infrastructure, and I'm very proud in this last year, you'll see, you know, before the airport, actually, if you looked at the building, it was moldy. When I got there, it was moldy. In this last couple of years, we've actually done a complete repainting of the exterior. So it's actually a very nice looking building. And also in this last year, we've worked on the flooring, which historically has been carpet. And so we didn't only restore it to carpet, we actually restored it to a material that if there was a flood we're not going to have to pull up again. So I just want to share that, you know, our team is a very high-performing team. And of course, yes, we are going to do our best to make cuts. And I will share that I have met with our team members individually to try to make sure, again, it's clear. You know, but our number one resource and our number one asset is really our employees.
Yep. Well, I tell you, Daphne, I'm not questioning at all your employees, maintenance, operations, those people on the ground making the airport move and providing the safety. I'm talking about the management of the airport. That's the issue here. It's not the hardworking employees of the airport. They're doing their job. They're taking instructions by management. And unfortunately, management is failing them because we need to make some cuts here. So that's the big issue here. So don't get me wrong. I know how hard the people work at the airport. It's management that put us in this predicament without any putting measures in place in case something like this may happen. Now, refinancing, and another thing. You talk about raising the rates to 160% for these airlines. Even if you weren't raising it, you know, the 6% that's already a rate given, mostly every year, it's done yearly, nothing stops any of these airports, even if we gave you the money, nothing stops these airlines from either pulling out or downsizing. Can you answer that, Mr. Director? Can you guarantee that if we give you this funding, that none of these airlines are going to pull out or downsize?
There's never a guarantee,
Exactly my point. We can't guarantee this from the airlines. They go based on the climate, the travel, looking at the yen and looking at all variables to pull out. Even if we did give money, what we're looking at now is the debt service. That's the issue, because the people that are looking at you are all those bond holders and staying in compliance with your bond covenant. So that's why I don't understand. You're coming here telling us that if you make everyone believe that if we give you this money, the airlines are not going to pull out. Like they said, that's not true. You can't guarantee that. Again, it's based on the climate. Now, you talked about restructuring financing. What's the probability of doing that? I know you did that back in 2019. If we can lessen our debt service or extend it longer to help you cover your obligation, have you guys thought about doing that? And why aren't you doing it? Or I understand these bond carriers or people who want to buy bonds from Guam. Guam has always been good because we pay it out. You know, we've never reneged on our obligation. But I know there's some variables here that doesn't make people comfortable about refinancing the bonds. And it's our climate. So what have you guys talked about to try and do refinancing?
Thank you so much, Senator. And, you know, appreciate all your comments. I get perhaps a little passionate when I talk about my team, so thank you. You know, a couple of things. Number one, I did mention, I think 2 days ago when we were here, that we actually had talked with our prior underwriter about the possibility of doing some debt restructuring so that we can see some immediate savings in our debt service. And of course, as you know, we are at a point where if we were going to do such thing, that of course that would have to come through this body for authorization. Generally, of course, the requirement is that there is some type of savings, usually to the tune of 2%, and of course that cost of issuance also does not exceed that amount. When we talked about with our bond underwriters and they ran some simulations for us, the reality is that for us to do some debt structuring so that we can have immediate savings, we're going to see negative savings, which means that, of course, it will cost us money to do it instead of us saving. But that will result in immediate or more immediate reduction of our debt. I did also at that time, I think 2 days ago, of course, defer to Director Carlson with regards to his comments regarding that particular type of transaction.
Okay. Frank, can you also chime in on this? Because I know you're very well versed on there. You've been at the airport for a very long time. In fact, I think the last bond, you were still there at the airport. Are there other areas in which we can, lessen this debt ceiling that and increase our the funding in our OMN reserve account to give that comfortableness against of people anticipating to buy, bond buying?
The initiative
bond holders, yeah.
The initiative we're undertaking is the defeasance, which is the $9 million, 8.8 to be exact, but $9 million worth of debt service that we would forego for FY26 only. And as Director Lester indicated, our bonds are 2021. We're not beyond the 10-year call date in order to do a restructuring that we've done before. So at this time, the defeasance is ranked at this time the only tool that we have to reduce debt service for the existing given year, 2026. In 2027, we're still restoring, going back to the $18 million of debt service. But if all the activities that we had planned in our FY27 budget comes into play, particularly passengers, then we should be able to meet it. The last 2 years, the current year and FY25, the airlines have provided the forecast. So if you look at the documentation in 25, there were 200,000 passengers short. In the current year, there are 200 passengers short. So even if you take $34.99 or $35 per in-plane passenger, that's for this year, that's $7 million just for that shortage. So if we got a little more conservative and asked the airlines to be more practical in forecasting their passengers, that's why they went down to 1.1 as opposed to 1.2. But to answer your question again, the defeasance is the current tool that we can use to reduce debt service for the current fiscal year.
So let's say the $9 million in tax, let's say we gave you that only. You know, it's a government of Guam debt. And I truly believe that we need to pay for it. I have no problem, you know, voting in favor of that $9 million. Where, if that's all you got, the $9 million, where would you put that? And then, again, if that's all you have that this body approves, where would you put it?
We would put that to make sure that we're in compliance with our bond mandate of the 1.25 coverage. Oh, so, yeah,
That's
it can't
what
go
I
into
would
O&M
think.
reserve.
Yeah. It would go all into reserve, right? So right now, if I'm not mistaken, your reserve is about $6 million from what you mentioned to trying to get to, you're trying to get to 12?
Hi. Just real quickly, so any revenues that we receive have to go through what's called the flow of funds, or sometimes we refer to as a waterfall. And that flow for revenue, it has to go through that flow of funds before it can be utilized for other things. So at the top level, right, it's of course, it's when we receive any money, it goes into our account, and that is used to pay our debt service and used to pay our monthly operation and maintenance expenses. As you mentioned and we talked about earlier, our O&M reserve account currently has about $3 million, but we need 15 or approximately 15. So the way that it would work is that $9 million really would have to go into our O&M reserve and couldn't be used for anything else, because it can't be used for something else or get to the next level until we fill up the $15 million reserve account. That's how that works. So in order for us to do the defeasance, we would need monies outside of the $9.25 million to be able to do that transaction.
How did it get so low in the reserves? $3 million. How did we get so low?
As I mentioned
earlier,
earlier,
how long have you had only $3 million in that reserve account?
well, as I mentioned earlier, when Senator Therese was talking about the increase in our revenues and why we were having to recover more, we tried to recover $6 million last fiscal year. So we actually projected to budget. We projected and we're trying to recover $6 million so that we could fill our O&M reserve. We were not able to recover that, and so that's why now it's an accumulation of what we haven't been able to fill, plus now what we're trying to fill because we've not been able to fill it.
In 2020, or in 2025, how much did you have in your reserves at the beginning of 2025?
I will have to get back to you on that. I don't have that number.
Do you know how much in 2024?
I'd have to get back to you, ma'am.
What, can you tell me if it was lower than $5 million?
I couldn't say right now, ma'am, but I can say that right now we have $3 million.
I mean, this is an account that governs your bond covenant. For you to not be able to give me those numbers versus you can give me numbers on everything else, that's kind of odd that you would not have those numbers because you're governed by that on all your debt.
Thank you know,
I mean,
I guess they can get that number to you before we debate the balance of the bill.
yeah, I'd like to know 2024, 25. You know, of course, we know there's only, what, $3 million in 2026. In a reserve account that's supposed to have at least $15 million to protect your bond covenant, and this has been neglected. I also want to ask, Mr. Chair, if they're going to give us that information, is all the information regarding salaries. I've been told that there's been an increase, a mitigation of salaries recently, you know, at the airport. And I want to know the increase of these salaries because it's
Sure.
okay as well.
I'm sure they'll provide it to you. Can you provide that? And then you can discuss that during the amendment portion and the closing on the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senators, at this time, we have completed the second round. We will return at 1:30 to begin discussion on amendments. Make sure all of your potential amendments are in by 1:30 before we begin. I want to thank the panel for being here, having completed the second round. We will release you at this time. You do not need to return after lunch, and we will begin our deliberations on amendments. Thank you once again for being here. And folks, we'll be back at 1:30. Please make sure all your amendments are in by then. We are in recess.